Hello friends, welcome to the higher module on institutional management for entrepreneurship. We are into the unit number 5, which is on business startups. This specific video is on business plan formulation, and this is the first part of this business plan formulation. There would be another video to complete this specific part. The contents of my presentation, there is a brief introduction. Then we have this business identification flowchart. Then we shall be discussing the salient features of the business plan, part 1 in this video and part 2 in the another video. So, in this video we shall be discussing the introduction regarding the business plan, then about the promoters, then about the project, about the location, infrastructure requirements and plant and machinery. Well, business plan is a proposal for creation of productive capacities for manufacturing goods or providing services. It is a most important step in launching a new venture or expanding an existing one. Business plan is an important tool of project planning and is basically an outcome of an exercise meant to check the viability or the feasibility of an enterprise. Business plan is known by many other names. The other names are like a project report, or we call it as a techno-economic, commercial or marketing viability report, or just the viability report and then the feasibility report. A business plan is a detailed description of mainly three things. Number 1 is what business you want to be in, that is whether it is a manufacturing business or a trading business or a servicing business. Secondly, how the business will achieve its goals, because when we make a business plan, we provide details regarding the infrastructure requirements, the manpower requirements, materials, financial resources and their mobilization and management and financial implications. So, through all these different parameters, we will try to ascertain that how the business will achieve its goals. And thirdly, when would that happen? That means the timeline or the implementation schedule. Now, the question is, why do we want to make a business plan? Well, a business plan basically shows the vision of an entrepreneur and his enterprise. So, whatever the entrepreneur has thought of, his vision for the future is reflected in the business plan, and same is for the enterprise also. How the enterprise intends to do in the coming years, that is a part of the business plan. Then opportunity sensing, that means how the person was able to sense the opportunity and how he was able to identify that specific business opportunity. Third is the financing arrangements, from where the money will be coming, the capital will be coming. Then the market assessment regarding the marketing of the products, then implementation issues, that is also discussed as a part of the business plan, and then the return on the investments, which is very important, that will you be getting any profits or not. So, how much the business will be giving returns on the investments. Now, next is the utility of a business plan. First is it helps in obtaining provisional or permanent registration. You see, in case you want to register your business with the concerned like the district industry centers or with the concerned agency, government agency, you need to have a business plan. So, initially we get a provisional registration before the start of the unit, and sometimes that is applicable for 5 years, and after that once the unit is running already, we get it permanently registered. So, for both the types of registration we need to have a business plan. Second is it helps in getting land or shed from the concerned agency. Third is it helps in securing supply of the scarce raw material. In case your raw material is, let us say, very scarce, like let us say steel, and you want to get some quota, so you have to submit your business plan. It helps in securing term loan and working capital loan. There are two types of loan normally, the term loan and the working capital loan, which we take from the banks or from the financial agencies. So, when you want to take these loans, you go to the banks or to the financial agency or the corporation and you submit your business plan. It helps in firming up the technical arrangements, choosing a location, selecting plant and machinery, finding out the manpower requirements, the utility needs and other parameters. because a business plan is just like a blueprint of your business for the times to come, and it depicts everything, and you can infer all these things from the business plan. It also generates a knowledge base for the entrepreneur, which will help him in formulating a business strategy. It helps the entrepreneur in establishing the techno-economic marketing or techno-economic commercial viability or feasibility of the enterprise. That means your project should be technically feasible. That means the technology which you want to employ should be feasible in the field. Economical feasibility means the project must return into profit generation, and the marketing or the commercial feasibility means you should be able to sell the products or the services which you are intending to plan. And then it educates the entrepreneur regarding the degree of risk underlying the enterprise proposal. It brings into sharp focus the key performance determinants in the chosen line of business. This slide is on business identification flow chart. How do we identify the business and how do we go ahead? You see, initially we have a lot of ideas, like a lot of business ideas. You get the ideas from like the natural resources in a certain area, then the markets, the exports, the import substitution, the technology. So, from all these the things you try to get a lot of ideas, and then you do the preliminary screening. So, after the screening you drop certain ideas, and then you proceed further, you go to the pre-feasibility study. After the pre-feasibility study you again drop some of the ideas, you go to the feasibility study. So, business plan is basically a feasibility study, and after the feasibility study you ultimately decide about a project, and then you go in for the design or for the construction of the business. Now, before I proceed further, let me clarify some of the basic terms, so that everybody is at the same page. One is the term loan. Like I was discussing a few moments earlier also. When we want to take a loan, there are two types of loan. One is a term loan, one is a working capital loan. You see, what is a term loan? The loan which we take for the creation of fixed assets, that is known as a term loan. Like the loan which we take for the like the land, building, plant and machinery, which are all basically fixed assets. So, that is called as a term loan, and normally we go to the state financial corporations, they are known as the SFCs, to get the term loans normally. The second is the working capital loan. You see, once you have created all the fixed assets, you need to get the money to run the business, because you need to have the money to buy the raw material, to pay for the salaries, electricity bills, water bills, etc. So, you need the money, and the loan which we take for running the business on a day-to-day basis, that is known as the working capital loan. And normally the entrepreneurs, they go to the banks to get the working capital loan or the working capital limit. This is in general, like like for getting a term loan you go to the state financial corporation, and for getting a working capital you go to the commercial banks. But there are certain schemes in which we have like single window schemes. Under a single window scheme you can get both the loans from a single window, and that single window could be either in a state financial corporation or in a commercial bank. This is basically the operating cycle. It basically shows the working capital. Operating cycle means like you have a cash in your hands after you have done all your fixed assets. So, you convert the cash into the raw materials. That means you purchase the raw materials from the cash. From the raw materials it is work in progress, the work is going on, and then you have the finished goods. The goods are ready to be sold, and then you sell them on credit, because normally in a business we sell them on credit, maybe 1 month credit, 2 months credit, 15 days credit, and then from there it again you get back the money, again you have the cash. So, this is basically a cycle. It is known as an operating cycle or a working capital cycle, and the money which is required to run this cycle is known as the working capital. Some more terms. There is a term known as the equity or the promoter's contribution or the margin money. You see, equity is basically the owner's money or the entrepreneur's money, his contribution basically. Promoter's contribution, the promoter, the one who is promoting the enterprise, the entrepreneur, or the margin money. You see, when you go to a bank or when you go to a financing agency to get the loan, they rarely give 100% loan. They may give say around 80%, 90%, 70%, 60%. The remaining amount of money which you have to put in as an entrepreneur, that is known as the equity that is your contribution or the promoter's contribution or the margin money. Next is the moratorium or the gestation period. This is basically, you see, when you take a loan from any agency, any funding agency, they will give you certain time to start repaying the loan. They may give you 1 year or 6 months, you can wait to start your EMIs, your installments, and that time is known as the moratorium period. It normally varies from 6 months to 18 months, and after that you can start paying your EMIs. Next is the debt equity ratio. Debt is basically the loan which you take from different funding agencies. Equity is your own money. So, when you make a business plan, they will also calculate the debt equity ratio. So, in the case of a small scale enterprise or in the case of a tiny or a micro enterprise, this ratio is normally 3:1. That means, in case you want to set up a tiny or a micro or a small scale enterprise, the banks will give you approximately 75% loan, and the remaining 25% you have to put in yourself. In the case of a medium scale or in the case of a large scale, this ratio is normally 2:1. That means, you will get approximately 2/3 of the loan, around 66-67%, and 33-34% you have to put in as your own equity. Next is the subsidy. Subsidy, I think everybody knows about the subsidy. Subsidy is basically a type of loan which you do not have to repay. It is a sort of an encouragement to the entrepreneurs to set up their businesses. Sometimes certain governments they give the subsidy so that they can attract the people to come to their states and they can set up their businesses over there. Like in the case of Himachal Pradesh, they give subsidies. If you go to, let us say, northeast, if you want to set up a business in the northeast area, because the government wants that area to be industrially developed. So, you get certain subsidies, you get certain tax incentives, you get certain tax holidays, etc. Then there is something known as the break even point. Break even point basically is a point where there is neither any profit nor any loss, because once you start a business, initially in the initial years, initial times, you are into the losses initially, maybe for some months, and then you break even, no profit, no loss, and then from there onwards you are running into the profits. Okay. Now, let us discuss the salient features of a business plan. In fact, the details are given in the e-content. I am just touching upon the salient points only. So, the first is the introduction. In the introduction, we give the current industrial status at this specific location. So, where you want to set up your business, your enterprise basically. So, what is the status of the industry at that point? So, how many existing units are there? What is the performance of existing units in general? If they are performing, let us say, very well, that means that area has got good scope. So, that thing we can ascertain from there. Then the installed capacity and the capacity utilization. So, depending upon the capacity utilization, that means like if the existing units they are let us say utilizing say 90% capacity or 80% capacity, that means the scope is good. There is a lot of demand is there. But if the capacity utilization is only 30%, 40%, that means the demand is not much there. Then the demand analysis and the scope for the new units. So, you will do that demand supply gap basically, and for the new units, how much is the demand for the new units, whether it is already saturated or does it have a scope for the new units also. Then the current status of the industry at the national level. So, that was at the location, a specific area. This is at the national level. How that industry is running at the national level. So, is it in demand or is it like future oriented, that you have to see. And then you have to give the rationale for project selection. So, why have you taken up this specific project? You have to justify. The justification could be on many parameters, like for example, the government's policy. Maybe the government's policy is very favorable. The government wants that specific type of industry to flourish. So, that can be a very good reason for justifying. Then the national priorities, it can comply with the national priorities. What are the national priorities? Like for example, you want the units to be export oriented or import substitute or generate a lot of employment, do some lot of innovations. So, these are all basically national priorities or environmental friendly items basically making. So, if your unit is trying to conform to the national priorities, again you will get a preference. Then the self suitability, how you as an entrepreneur, how you are suitable to start that business. So, you have to justify your suitability in terms of your experience, in terms of your your education qualifications may be in, regarding the specific project. The second is about the promoter or about the promoters. In case we have more than one, then about the promoters. First is the educational qualification, educational background. So, they will see your unit, your proposed unit and your background basically, is it matching, like suppose you want to go in for a very high tech, let us say unit, and maybe you are not that much technically qualified, it can go a bit against, so that will they will check. Then the work experience, you have any work experience regarding that project, then project related experience, which is very important, that concerning the specific project, if you have an experience, that is always on the plus side. Then the family background, in case you come from a business family background, that is always a plus point. In case you come from a service or other family backgrounds, it's not a negative factor, but the people who are from the business family, they get a little preference, because they think that the business runs in their bloods basically, and they are much more better suited to start a business. And then investment potential, how much money you can put in, what is your this financial status basically. So, this thing, and same thing for your partners also. Third is about the project. In this the description of the product and its use. In this we can give the specifications, the range of sizes, statutory standards regarding that product. Then the application of the product, if it is a commercial product or an industrial product. So, you have to you have to clarify everything over there. Then what is the installed capacity? In fact, it is a most important parameter for assessing the plant and machinery, because depending upon your capacity which you have installed. So, your space, your machinery, your plant, everything will be decided according to that only. So, that is why we say that it is the most important parameter for assessing the plant and machinery, other physical facilities, and for financial viability calculations. Then the number of working days in a year, normally we take around 300 days in a year if it is not seasonal. And then the number of shifts, the shifts can be 1, 2 or 3, but 3s are of course very rare, normally they are 1 to 2 shifts only. Then the operating capacity, so you have an installed capacity and then you will show your operating capacity year by year, maybe for the next let us say 5 years or 10 years or 3 years maybe, like maybe in the very first year maybe it is around 50% because you are starting new. Second year maybe 60%, third year maybe 70%, and then you can increase. Then what will distinguish the proposed project from others already operating? So, there are many similar projects which are already running, which are already in existence. So, how do you distinguish yourself from those units? Okay, you have to show your USP. Any legal requirement regarding the product. So, that again you have to write it over there. Then clearances from the government and other regulatory agencies, and status with regard to obtaining such clearances. Next point is about the location, and this we give the exact location of the project. Location means like for example, I want to set up a business, let us in Himachal Pradesh. So, maybe Parwanu, which is a industrial city, or a Baddi, So, these are all basically the locations, maybe the industrial area is the location. So, exact location of the project, then various other alternatives. In case you are not able to get a space over there, then which are the alternatives available with you, and then the criteria for selecting the location. On what basis have you selected that specific location? So, it is a 2-stage procedure. In the first stage, we identify 2 to 3 locations and 1 to 2 sites at each location. Site is the exact spot where you will set up your factory or your business or your enterprise basically. Location is like a city or a town or an industrial area basically. So, in the first stage, we identify 2 to 3 locations and 1 to 2 sites. In the second stage, we examine each location or the site in terms of 6-dimensional checklist. So, this is that that checklist. In this we will check the basic considerations, we will check the developmental status of the town and the location with reference to the enterprise needs, number 1. Number 2, physical infrastructure position in terms of the power, water availability. Third is the commercial infrastructure position in terms of the banking facilities, telecommunication facilities. Fourth is social infrastructure position, like like housing, health, dispensaries, hospitals, because your worker will be may be needing those facilities. Then the financial incentives position, like in investment subsidies, in case you are getting a subsidies at some place, income tax concessions maybe, and then the site specific considerations, like for example, the land price can vary from place to place, So, that again you can justify a certain area because it is a little cheaper than the other areas, or the contours, sometimes your machinery is very heavy. So, you need to have a very hard, rocky terrain. So, you can justify that specific area based on the contouring also, because it all depends upon your machinery or your enterprise. Suppose you want to set up a pharmaceutical unit. So, it needs a very environmental, friendly environmental clearance, you need environmental, clear this thing environment. So, maybe you go to the hills maybe, to go to set up a pharmaceutical industry, or you want to set up a watchmaking industry, again you need a very clear environment, clear this thing weather. So, you can justify based on those considerations also. The fifth is the infrastructure requirements. In this we will calculate we will have the land, in the land the total area requirement, and then the cost, the total area including your future expansion also, and then the cost of that land. Second is the building you will construct over that land, the total built up area required, the type of construction, again it will depend upon the type of industry, the cost, the layout, then the power requirements, how many kilowatts or this thing you need the power, and the requirement of the water, fuel, effluent disposal, etc. Next is the plant and machinery. In this we will first have the installed capacity, and you will have to indicate the technical features of the machines, the basis of selecting that specific machinery, the suitability and the adequacy, because if you want to go in for a very high specialized quality products, your machine should be able to produce that quality products, So, that you have to match, sync. Then availability of the components, in case it is an imported machinery, then will you be able to get the components or not, indigenous, imported, etc. Then who are the suppliers, what is the cost, what are the various alternatives available, and what is the criteria for choosing the proposed equipment among several other alternatives. Then the dies and the spares required. If it is an old machinery you want to buy rather than buying for a new machinery, then you have to see the present condition, its value and the residual life also. And secondly, you have to check the policy of the term loan organizations regarding the lending money for the old machinery. Sometimes the banks or the financial corporations, they are not lending the money for buying a old machinery. So, you have to see their stipulations also. Next is the machinery supplier selection. In this we will see the technical features of the machines, the reliability of the suppliers, the price offered by the suppliers, delivery period and the reputation of the suppliers, nature of warranties or performance guarantees offered, and the scope of after sales services. So, these are all very important considerations when looking for the machinery suppliers. So, I think that is all in this specific video. So, this was just one part of the first part of this business plan formulation. We have covered some of the salient points. We will go cover the remaining points in the next video, and for going into the details of all these things, you can refer to the e-contents. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much.